The knife clattered to the diner floor, and the sound it made wasn't metal. It was the shattering of a man's last illusion of power. Mara didn't scream. She only pressed her hand to her chest, as if checking whether her heart was still capable of beating without permission. Welcome to M Facts. Before we start this story, tell us where in the world you are watching from. And if you believe kindness should never die, please subscribe and help us keep stories like this alive. I didn't know Mara Brennan before that October night. Didn't know the way she held coffee cups with both hands like they might slip through her fingers if she wasn't careful. Didn't know how she checked the parking lot every 30 seconds through the rain-streaked window of Kettle's diner, or how her shoulders never fully relaxed even when she was alone. But I knew fear when I saw it wearing someone's face. She sat in the corner booth, the one with the torn vinyl seat that nobody else wanted. Her jacket was too thin for the cold snap that had rolled through northern Michigan that week. The bruise on her cheekbone wasn't hidden well, just a layer of makeup that had worn off in patches, revealing purple-yellow skin underneath. She wasn't eating, just staring at a plate of fries going cold, pushing them around with a fork like she was trying to remember what hunger felt like before survival became the only appetite that mattered. Kettle's wasn't busy. Tuesday nights never were. A couple of truckers sat at the counter. An older woman nursed decaf in the back, and then there was Reaper. He didn't have a real name anyone used anymore. Just the road name stitched across the back of his leather vest beneath the winged skull patch of the Hells Angels. He was maybe 50, maybe older, hard to tell with men like him. Men whose faces had been carved by weather, loss, and 10,000 miles of asphalt that taught them more about humanity than any church ever could. He sat 3 booths away from Mara, drinking black coffee, scanning the room with the kind of awareness that came from years of knowing trouble before it announced itself. And he saw her, saw the trembling hands, the checked exits, the way she flinched when the bell above the door chimed. He didn't approach her, not yet, just watched with the quiet intensity of someone deciding whether to step into a stranger's war. Outside, the rain hammered the pavement. Inside, the jukebox played something low and sad. And somewhere between those two sounds, Mara's breathing hitched like she was trying not to cry. The waitress, Deb, her name tag read, refilled Reaper's coffee without asking. She'd worked at Kettle's long enough to know bikers didn't make small talk and didn't want fuss, just fuel and silence. But when she approached Mara's booth, her expression shifted, went soft in that way people do when they recognize pain they've worn themselves. "Anything else, honey?" Deb's voice was gentle. Mara shook her head quickly, too quickly. "Just the check, please." Her voice was barely there, thin as tissue paper. Deb hesitated, then nodded, set the check face down on the table and walked away, glancing back once with something that looked like worry. Mara fumbled through her purse with shaking hands, pulled out crumpled bills and started counting, her lips moving silently. Once, twice, 3 times, like the numbers kept changing on her. Reaper watched this from his booth. Watched her panic over $8.40 like it was the difference between breathing and drowning. He stood, not fast, not dramatic, just rose with the slow certainty of a man who'd made a decision and wouldn't be talked out of it. He walked to the counter, pulled a 20 from his wallet and set it down in front of Deb. Nodded toward Mara's booth, her meal and whatever else she needs. Deb looked at him, then at Mara, then back at Reaper. Understanding passed between them without words. "You got it," Deb said quietly. Reaper didn't wait for thanks, just returned to his booth and his coffee like nothing had happened. But Mara had seen it, seen the exchange. And when Deb told her the bill was covered, Mara's eyes found Reaper across the diner. Wide, confused, something between gratitude and fresh terror because kindness, to someone who'd been hurt enough, could feel like the first move in a new trap. Reaper didn't meet her gaze, just lifted his mug slightly. A small gesture, nothing more. The message was clear: you're safe here. Breathe. For maybe 10 seconds Mara did. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. Her grip on the table loosened. Then the front door exploded inward. The bell didn't just ring, it shrieked as the door slammed against the wall hard enough to crack the frame. Rain blew in sideways, and with it came a man who brought violence into the room like a second skin. Kyle Brennan. He stood in the doorway, soaked through, chest heaving, eyes scanning the diner with the kind of wild focus that separated predators from everything else that walked upright. He found her immediately. Mara. The way he said her name made my stomach turn. Not loud, not yet, just flat and cold and certain, like he was calling in a debt. Mara went rigid. Her hand flew to her mouth. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might pass out. "Kyle." It came out as a whisper, a plea, please. He crossed the diner in 4 long strides, boots leaving wet prints on the linoleum. The truckers at the counter turned away. The older woman suddenly became very interested in her phone. Nobody wanted to be a witness. Kyle reached Mara's booth and leaned down, planting both hands on the table. Water dripped from his hair onto her fries. "You think you can just leave?" His voice was low, controlled, but shaking with barely contained rage. "You think you can embarrass me like that, make me look like a fool?" I wasn't." Mara's words tangled. She was shrinking into the booth, trying to disappear into the vinyl. 3 hours. Kyle's jaw clenched. 3 hours I've been looking for you. Do you know what people are gonna say? My wife runs off like some. She's trying to eat. The voice came from behind Kyle. Calm, steady, unmistakable. Reaper hadn't raised his voice, didn't need to. The words carried weight all on their own. Kyle straightened slowly and turned. Took in the leather vest, the patches, the man wearing them. For a second, something like calculation crossed Kyle's face. He was deciding whether this was a problem he could handle. "This doesn't concern you," Kyle said, trying for authority. Missing it by a mile, Reaper didn't move. Just stood there, coffee mug still in hand, looking at Kyle the way you'd look at a dog that hadn't learned it was already beaten. "It does now." Kyle took a step toward Reaper, puffed his chest out. Tried to make himself bigger than he was. "You know who I work for?" Kyle's voice climbed half an octave. "I've got connections, you don't want to." "I don't care." Reaper set his coffee down on the nearest table, slow, deliberate. "Step away from her." Kyle's face flushed red. "She's my wife, you got no right." "She's a person." Reaper's tone didn't change, didn't rise, didn't need to. "And you're scaring her, so I'm asking you one more time, step away." Something flickered in Kyle's eyes. Not fear yet, but recognition. The beginning of understanding that he'd miscalculated badly. Behind him, Mara was crying silently, tears streaming down her face as she pressed herself into the corner of the booth. Kyle made his choice. He lunged, not at Reaper, at Mara. Grabbed her wrist and yanked hard enough that she cried out, her shoulder wrenching as he tried to drag her from the booth. Reaper moved, not fast, not wild, just efficient. Closed the distance in 2 steps, grabbed Kyle's wrist, and applied pressure in exactly the right place to make his hand open involuntarily. Kyle yelped, spun around with his free hand balled into a fist. The punch came fast but sloppy. Reaper turned his head slightly and it grazed his jaw, enough to sting, not enough to matter. Then Reaper responded, one shot, right to Kyle's solar plexus, not hard enough to cause real damage. Just hard enough to empty his lungs and drop him to one knee, gasping. The diner went silent except for the rain and Kyle's desperate wheezing. Reaper leaned down, voice quiet. "You done?" Kyle looked up at him with watering eyes, still trying to pull air into his lungs. His face was a mix of shock, rage, and something new he wasn't used to feeling. Powerlessness. He wasn't done. Kyle's hand shot out and grabbed the ketchup bottle from the table, swung it at Reaper's head. Reaper caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted. The bottle fell and shattered on the floor, red sauce splashing across both their boots like a warning. And that's when Kyle went for the knife. It was a steak knife, nothing special, just standard diner silverware with a serrated edge that had been sharpened down by years of use. Kyle grabbed it from the booth behind him and lunged at Reaper with the kind of desperate, flailing aggression of a man who'd never actually been in a real fight. Mara screamed. Reaper sidestepped, caught Kyle's wrist and slammed it down on the edge of the table. Not brutal, just precise. The knife clattered to the floor and Kyle howled, pain and humiliation mixed together. But Reaper didn't let go. He twisted Kyle's arm behind his back and walked him forward until his face was pressed against the rain-streaked window. "Listen to me." Reaper's voice was right in Kyle's ear, quiet enough that only Kyle could hear. "You're going to leave. You're going to get in whatever piece of shit car you drove here, and you're going to go home." Kyle struggled, tried to push back. Reaper applied more pressure and Kyle went still. "If you come back," Reaper continued, "if you call her, if you so much as drive past wherever she decides to sleep tonight, you're going to deal with me. And the rest of my brothers, do you understand?" Kyle's breath fogged the window. He didn't answer. Reaper applied just enough pressure to make it hurt. "I asked if you understand." Yes, it came out strangled, humiliated. Reaper released him, shoved him toward the door. Kyle stumbled, caught himself, turned back with murder in his eyes, and froze when he saw 3 more Hell's Angels standing in the doorway. They hadn't been there before. Must have pulled up during the commotion. Must have seen something through the window that told them their brother might need backup. They didn't say anything. Didn't need to. just stood there in the rain, leather vests dark with water, blocking the exit like a wall of consequences. Kyle's bravado crumbled. He looked from them to Reaper to Mara, and whatever last thread of control he'd been clinging to snapped. He ran, pushed past the bikers, and disappeared into the storm like a ghost. The silence after Kyle left was heavier than the sound of the rain. It pressed down on the diner like the weight of everything that had just happened needed time to settle into something people could process. Mara hadn't moved. Still pressed into the corner of the booth, one hand covering her mouth, the other gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had gone white. She was shaking. Full-body tremors that started somewhere deep and worked their way out until even her breathing stuttered. Reaper turned to face her, kept his distance, kept his hands visible and loose at his sides. "You hurt." His voice had gone soft, the kind of gentle you wouldn't expect from a man who just put another man through a window. Mara shook her head, then nodded, then shook it again like she couldn't remember what truth felt like. "He didn't, I'm not." The words wouldn't form. She tried again. "My shoulder." "Can you move it?" She tested it slowly, winced but nodded. "Good." Reaper glanced at the three bikers still standing in the doorway, made a small gesture with his head. Two of them walked back outside. The third, a younger guy with a scar cutting through his eyebrow, came inside and started picking up the broken glass from the ketchup bottle. Deb emerged from behind the counter with a first aid kit and a towel. She approached Mara's booth carefully, like you would a wounded animal. "Let me see your wrist, honey." Mara extended her arm. It was already bruising where Kyle had grabbed her, purple fingerprints pressed into pale skin. Deb cleaned it gently, applied some cream, wrapped it in gauze, didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The care itself was the message. When she finished, she looked at Reaper. "Coffee." "Yeah, and something hot for her." He nodded at Mara. "Soup, whatever you got." Deb disappeared back into the kitchen. Reaper pulled out the chair across from Mara's booth. Didn't sit yet. Just stood there holding it. "Mind if I sit? Won't come closer than this." Mara stared at him. Her eyes were still wide, still processing, but something had shifted. The immediate terror was fading into exhaustion. "Why did you help me?" The question came out raw. Confused, Reaper shrugged. "Because you needed it." "You don't even know me." "Don't need to." Reaper sat down slowly, keeping the table between them. He picked up a napkin and wiped ketchup off his knuckles, methodical and calm, like violence was just another mess to clean up before moving on. Myra watched him, still trembling but trying to stop, trying to pull herself back together piece by piece. "He'll come back," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "He always comes back." Reaper looked at her, really looked, saw past the bruise and the fear to something underneath that was still fighting even when it looked like surrender. "Not tonight, he won't. You don't know him, he doesn't let things go. He'll wait until you leave and then," her voice cracked. She pressed her palms against her eyes. "God, I'm so stupid, I should have just gone home, I should have." "Stop," Reaper's voice was firm but not harsh. "You're not stupid. And you're not going back there. I don't have anywhere else." "Yeah, you do." Mara lowered her hands, looked at him with something between hope and disbelief. "Where?" Before Reaper could answer, Deb returned with 2 bowls of chicken soup and a basket of bread. Set them down gently. "On the house," she said, then to Mara. "There's a women's shelter about 40 minutes north in Traverse City. Good people, they'll help you get situated." Mara stared at the soup like it was a foreign object. "I don't have a car, he took the keys. I took the bus here and used my last 20 for the ticket." Reaper pulled out his phone, sent a quick text, put it back in his pocket. "You've got a ride, my brothers'll take you wherever you need to go. Shelter, police station, different state, doesn't matter." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm offering." He pushed one of the soup bowls toward her. "Eat, you need your strength for whatever comes next." Myra picked up the spoon with a shaking hand, took a small sip, then another, like her body was remembering what nourishment felt like after months of surviving on fear alone. They sat in silence for a while. Just the sound of rain and spoons against ceramic and the low murmur of the jukebox playing something old and bluesy. The younger biker with the scar, his vest Reed, Flint, finished cleaning up the glass and approached the booth. He had kind eyes, the sort that didn't match the hard edges of everything else about him. "Truck's warmed up," he said to Reaper. Then to Mara, "Whenever you're ready, ma'am, no rush." "Ma'am," like she was someone worthy of respect instead of a problem to be managed. Mara's eyes filled with tears again. But this time they were different. Not fear. Something closer to relief or maybe disbelief that strangers could show up in the worst moment of your life and decide you were worth protecting. "I don't understand," she said, looking between Reaper and Flint. "Why are you doing this?" Flint glanced at Reaper, who gave a small nod. "We've all got people we couldn't save," Flint said quietly. "Sisters, daughters, mothers. People who needed someone to step in and nobody did." He adjusted his vest. "So when we get the chance, we step in, simple as that." Mara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you." I don't know how to." "Don't thank us yet," Reaper said. "Getting you out tonight's the easy part. The hard part's what comes after. Police reports, restraining orders, finding a place to stay, rebuilding." He leaned forward slightly. "You strong enough for that?" It was a genuine question, not a challenge, just an honest assessment of what she was about to face. Mara set down her spoon, straightened her spine, met his eyes. "I don't know," she said, "but I'm tired of being scared, so I guess I'm going to find out." Reaper almost smiled. "Almost? That's a good start." Outside, headlights swept across the diner windows. Two more motorcycles pulled into the lot, engines rumbling low and steady like thunder that had learned patience. Reaper's phone buzzed. He checked it, nodded to himself. "That's Smoke and Axel. They'll escort Flint's truck. Make sure nobody follows you." He looked at Mara. "You ready?" She wasn't, not really. But she nodded anyway because sometimes ready is just another word for desperate enough to try. Mara stood on shaking legs. Deb handed her a to-go bag with sandwiches and chips, pressed it into her hands like a benediction. "You call that shelter?" Deb said. "Don't wait. They've got beds and people who know how to help. You hear me?" Mara nodded, hugged the bag to her chest. Reaper walked her to the door. Flint held it open, and the cold October air rushed in, sharp and clean, and nothing like the suffocating atmosphere she'd been living in for the past 2 years. The parking lot was small. Flint's truck sat idling near the entrance, a beat-up Ford that had seen better decades but still ran strong. 2 motorcycles flanked it, riders waiting patiently in the rain. Mara hesitated at the threshold. Looked back at the diner like she was leaving more than just a building behind. "What if he finds me?" she asked. "What if the shelter isn't safe enough?" Reaper pulled a card from his wallet, handed it to her. It was simple. Just a phone number and a single word, Reaper. "You feel unsafe, you call that number, day or night, doesn't matter, someone answers." Mara stared at the card like it was a lifeline thrown into dark water. "You'd really?" "We protect our own," Reaper said. "And as of tonight, you're one of ours, whether you wear a vest or not." Something broke in Mara then, the last wall she'd been holding up. She stepped forward and hugged him, quick and tight and desperate, like she was trying to remember what safety felt like in human form. Reaper stiffened for just a second, then gently patted her shoulder. Let her take what she needed from the moment. When she pulled back, she was crying and smiling at the same time. "I'll pay you back somehow, I swear." "Just live," Reaper said. "That's payment enough." Flint opened the truck door. Mara climbed in, still clutching the to-go bag and the card. Through the rain-streaked window, she looked small and fragile and terrified. But she also looked like someone who decided to survive. The truck pulled out of the parking lot slowly, headlights cutting through the rain. The 2 motorcycles fell in behind it, one on each side like guardian angels made of chrome and leather and gasoline. Reaper watched until the taillights disappeared into the storm. Then he turned and walked back into the diner, water dripping from his vest onto the linoleum. Deb was wiping down the counter. She looked up when he entered. "You think she'll be okay?" Reaper sat back down in his original booth, picked up his cold coffee. "That's good, you file a report. Yesterday, the police took pictures of the bruises, said they'd issue a restraining order." She paused. "Kyle's been calling, leaves voicemails, says he's sorry, says he just wants to talk." "Block the number." "I did, but he got a new phone, called from that." Her voice wavered slightly. "He knows I'm at a shelter, doesn't know which one yet, but he's looking. He told my sister he'd find me, that we just needed to work things out." Reaper's jaw tightened. "Your sister tell him anything?" "No, she doesn't know where I am either. I haven't told anyone except the police and the shelter staff." Mara took a shaky breath. "I'm scared, Reaper. The restraining order's just paper." "He doesn't care about paper. What do you need?" The question was simple, direct, the way Reaper handled most things. "I don't know, I needed to hear someone say it's going to be okay." Reaper looked out at the parking lot, at the row of motorcycles lined up like soldiers, at the gray Michigan sky pressing down on everything. "I can't promise it'll be okay," he said. "Life doesn't work that way, but I can promise you're not alone." And I can promise if he shows up where he shouldn't be, he'll regret it. Mara was quiet for a moment. Then, the shelter coordinator wants to move me to a more secure facility, out of state maybe. Michigan has a network. They can place me in Ohio or Indiana, somewhere he won't think to look. That what you want? I don't know what I want, I just know I can't keep living like this. Reaper spent the next hour making calls. Not to other bikers, not yet. To people who existed in the spaces between law and loyalty, a paralegal who owed him a favor, a private investigator who'd worked with the club before, a woman who ran a domestic violence nonprofit 3 counties over. By the time he was done, he had information. Kyle Brennan worked construction, had a record, nothing major, couple of bar fights, DUI from 5 years back. No priors for domestic violence because Myra had never reported him before. But there were hospital visits, 3 in the past year alone. Falls, she'd told the doctors, clumsy accidents. Kyle lived in a rental house on the south side of Cadillac. Drove a blue Chevy Silverado with a dent in the passenger door. Drank at a place called Murphy's Tap Room most Friday nights. Had a brother who worked at the same construction company, a mother who still lived in the area. The picture came together quickly. Kyle wasn't smart, just mean and persistent. The kind of man who mistook stubbornness for strength and control for love. Reaper saved all the information in a file on his phone. Sent copies to Flint and 2 other brothers, Smoke, and a guy named Deacon who'd done time for assault but had mellowed in his 50s into something closer to a warrior monk. Then he called Myra back. How long you planning to stay at the shelter? They said I can stay 2 weeks, maybe a month if there's space. After that I need to figure out housing, a job, everything. She sounded overwhelmed. Like the weight of rebuilding a life from nothing was just now settling on her shoulders. You got people? Family. My sister, but she's got 3 kids and a husband who doesn't want drama. Can't blame them. Myra's voice went quiet. My parents died 6 years ago, car accident. I met Kyle at the funeral. He seemed safe back then, steady. Reaper understood. Predators always seemed safe at first. That was how they got close. Listen, he said. I'm going to have one of my brothers check in on your situation every few days, just to make sure Kyle's keeping his distance. You're not going to see them. They'll stay invisible, but they'll be watching. You don't have to. I know, but I'm going to anyway. Kyle Brennan was not a man accustomed to losing. He sat in his truck outside Murphy's Tap Room, 4th beer in hand, staring at his phone like the screen might rearrange itself into something he could understand. 12 calls to Myra, all blocked, texts bouncing back. Even her sister wouldn't tell him shit. She'd made him look like a fool, left him in front of God and everyone, and now people were talking. Coworkers asked where she was. His brother made jokes about being whipped. His mother called asking if everything was all right with the marriage. Everything was fine. It would be fine once Myra came home and they worked this out like adults. She just needed to stop being dramatic. Kyle finished the beer, tossed the can into the passenger seat with the other empties, started the engine. He'd driven past the shelter in Traverse City twice already. Security cameras, locked doors. A woman at the desk who looked at him like he was a disease. I'm looking for my wife, he'd said. We don't give out information on residents, she'd replied, flat, professional, bored even. She's sick, she needs medication. I'm just trying to help. If she needs medication, she can contact you herself. He'd wanted to reach across that desk and shake some sense into her, but cameras were everywhere. And after what happened with that biker, Kyle had learned to be more careful. The biker. Kyle's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He could still feel the humiliation of being thrown around like a child. Still see those other bikers standing in the doorway. Still hear the quiet promise in that man's voice. You're going to deal with me, and the rest of my brothers. Kyle wasn't scared of bikers. They were just thugs with motorcycles. Criminals who thought patches and leather made them tough. But he was smart enough to know he needed backup. His brother Garrett was bigger, meaner, had done 6 months for aggravated assault and come out harder than he went in. Garrett would help. Garrett understood that sometimes a man had to remind his woman who was in charge. Kyle pulled out of the parking lot and headed home. Started composing a text to Garrett. Need your help with something. Call me. 4 days later, Flint called Reaper at 2 in the morning. We got movement. Reaper was awake instantly. He didn't sleep well anymore. Hadn't for years. Just light dozing punctuated by old nightmares and the habit of listening for trouble that never quite went away. Talk, blue Silverado, circling the shelter twice in the past hour. Different guy driving, not Kyle, bigger, shaved head, goatee. Brother, Reaper said. He'd seen Garrett Brennan's photo. Kyle sent him to scout. Maybe. Or maybe they're both dumber than we thought and plan to do something stupid. Reaper was already pulling on his boots. Where are you? Parked 2 blocks west. Got eyes on the front entrance. Stay there, I'm 10 minutes out. Reaper grabbed his vest and keys, left the clubhouse without waking anyone else. This didn't need to be a full club event, not yet. Just 2 men having a conversation about boundaries and consequences. He took his Harley, a road king that had carried him through 20 states and twice as many storms. The engine roared to life and he pulled onto the empty street, cutting through the October darkness. The roads were quiet this time of night. Just him and the asphalt and the steady rhythm of rubber on pavement. His breath misted in the cold air. His hands were steady on the handlebars. He thought about Mara sleeping in a shelter bed, thought about Emma sleeping in a grave. Thought about all the women and children who needed someone to stand between them and the men who confused violence with strength. And he thought about the promise he'd made to himself 17 years ago when they lowered his daughter into the ground. Never again, not if I can stop it. When he pulled up beside Flint's truck, the younger biker handed him a pair of binoculars. There. Reaper followed the direction. Saw the Silverado idling across the street from the shelter. Saw Garrett Brennan in the driver's seat, phone pressed to his ear, talking to someone, planning something. Reaper and Flint watched the truck for another 20 minutes. Garrett made 3 more phone calls, wrote something down on a piece of paper. Kept checking the rearview mirror like a man who knew he was doing something he shouldn't be. Then another vehicle pulled up. A black Honda Accord. Kyle Brennan got out. The brothers stood in the street talking. Garrett gestured at the shelter. Kyle shook his head, pointed down the block. They were arguing about something, strategy maybe, timing. We going to stop them? Flint asked quietly. Reaper lowered the binoculars. Not yet, let's see what they're planning first. They waited. The brothers talked for another 5 minutes, then both got in the Silverado and drove off heading south. Reaper started his bike. Follow them, keep distance. They tailed the Silverado through quiet streets, staying far enough back not to be obvious. The truck stopped at a gas station. Kyle went inside, came out with 2 energy drinks and a pack of cigarettes. They sat in the parking lot for another 15 minutes. Then they drove to Mara's old house. Reaper's jaw tightened when he realized where they were headed. The small rental on Maple Street with the sagging porch and the yard that needed mowing. Lights were off. No cars in the driveway. Kyle got out, tried the front door. Locked. He walked around back, disappeared from view for a moment, then returned, shaking his head. They were looking for something. Evidence, maybe. Something they could use to track her down. Garrett leaned against the truck, smoking a cigarette. Then his phone rang. He answered, listened. His expression shifted, something ugly and satisfied crawling across his face. He said something to Kyle. Kyle's whole body language changed, went from frustrated to excited. They both got in the truck and drove off fast. Reaper and Flint followed. The Silverado headed north, back toward Traverse City, back toward the shelter. They know something, Flint said into his helmet comm. Someone tipped them off. Yeah. Reaper's voice was grim. Question is who? The Silverado didn't stop at the shelter. It drove past slowly, Garrett at the wheel, Kyle scanning the building like he was memorizing exits. Then they turned down a side street and parked near a 24-hour diner 2 blocks away. Reaper and Flint pulled into a lot across the street, killed their engines. Watched through the diner windows as the Brennan brothers ordered coffee and spread what looked like printed pages across the table. They're planning something, Flint said. Something tonight. Reaper's phone buzzed. Text from Deacon, got a problem. Shelter employee just left shift early. Woman named Rita Cochran. Works intake desk. Got into her car crying, something's wrong. Reaper typed back, stay on her. To Flint. We got a leak, inside person at the shelter. Flint swore under his breath. Kyle pay her off. Or scared her, doesn't matter which. Reaper watched the brothers through the window. Kyle was animated now, pointing at the papers, talking fast. Garrett nodded slowly, that ugly satisfaction still on his face. They think they know when Mara's alone, when security's light. So what do we do? Reaper thought for a moment, weighed options. They could call the police, but what would they say? 2 men sitting in a diner wasn't a crime. The restraining order hadn't been served yet. Paperwork was still processing. And cops moved slow when it came to domestic situations unless someone was already bleeding. By the time law enforcement responded, it might be too late. We handle it ourselves, Reaper said, but smart, no violence unless they start it. And if they do start it. Reaper's expression went cold. Then we finish it. He made 2 more calls. First to Smoke, who was 20 minutes away. Then to a woman named Karen who ran security at the shelter, former corrections officer who'd left the job after watching too many women get sent back to the men who hurt them. Karen answered on the second ring. It's 2:30 in the morning, Reaper. Rita Cochran, she give Kyle Brennan any information. Silence, then how did you? Is Mara safe? For now, Rita told them visiting hours and shift changes. Said Mara's been going outside for walks around 3 in the afternoon. Parking lot behind the building. That's when we're understaffed. Rita still work there. Not after tonight, she doesn't. I fired her an hour ago. Caught her on camera taking money from someone in the parking lot. Karen's voice was tight with anger. Goddamn idiot put every woman in this building at risk. Can you move Mara tonight? Where? Anywhere Kyle doesn't know about. Different shelter, hotel, somewhere. Karen was quiet for a moment, thinking. There's a safe house in Petoskey, 50 miles north, runs off the books. No records, no paper trail. I can have her there by dawn. Do it, and Karen. Yeah. Nobody knows where she goes. Not staff, not other residents, nobody. Understood. Reaper hung up, looked at Flint. Myra's getting moved, but those 2 don't know that yet. They're going to show up tomorrow thinking she's vulnerable. And we'll be waiting. Yeah, we'll be waiting. The next morning came cold and gray. It was another bluff, partial truth mixed with assumption. But the way Kyle's face went pale suggested it was hitting close enough to target. You can't keep her from me, Kyle said, but the confidence was leaking out of his voice. I got rights, the law. The law moves slow, Reaper interrupted. We don't, so here's how this works. You go home, you stay away from Myra, you don't call her, don't look for her. Don't ask her sister or friends or anyone else where she went. You let her disappear. And if I don't... Reaper took 1 step forward, just 1, but the energy changed. Smoke and Flint shifted their weight slightly. 3 men who'd been in enough fights to know exactly how to hurt someone without leaving marks that couldn't be explained as accidents. Then you'll find out what it feels like, Reaper said quietly, to be scared in your own home. To jump at every sound. To wonder if today's the day someone comes through your door who doesn't care about your excuses or your reasons. You'll find out what you put her through. Garrett's jaw clenched. That's assault, that's a threat. It's a promise. The parking lot went quiet, just the wind and distant traffic and the weight of words that couldn't be taken back. Kyle looked at his brother. Garrett looked at the 3 bikers. Some calculation was happening behind both their eyes. Math about consequences and whether their pride was worth what came next. This is bullshit, Kyle said finally, but he was backing toward the truck. You can't just... Already did. Reaper didn't move. Go home, Kyle, mourn your marriage. Move on, because if I see you around here again or hear you've been asking questions or find out you've contacted her in any way, he let the sentence hang. Garrett grabbed Kyle's arm, pulled him toward the truck. Come on. This ain't worth it. She's my wife. She's gone. Garrett's voice was harder now, realistic. He'd done time, knew what happened when you pushed too hard against people who pushed back. Let it go. They drove away. Kyle staring back through the passenger window with impotent rage. Garrett focused on the road, already distancing himself from whatever plan they'd made. Flint watched them disappear around the corner. Think they'll actually stay away. Kyle will push, Smoke said. Men like that always do. Their ego won't let them stop. Reaper pulled out his phone, sent a text to Karen. They came, they left. Mara stays hidden until we know they're done. Response came back immediately. Already moved her, won't tell you where, but she's safe. Good, the less anyone knew the better. So what now? Flint asked. Now we watch them, take turns, make sure they know we're there without being obvious about it. Reaper looked at both his brothers. Kyle works construction. Garrett works the same site. They drink at Murphy's. They've got a routine. We become part of that routine, just visible enough that they remember what happens if they don't behave. Babysitting duty, Smoke said, but he was smiling. This was the kind of work they understood, protection that didn't require violence, just presence, just the steady reminder that someone was paying attention. They split up. Smoke headed back toward Cadillac to set up surveillance. Flint went to grab food and coffee for what would be a long shift. Reaper stayed in the shelter parking lot for another hour, making sure the Brennan brothers didn't circle back. His phone rang. Mara. They told me you were here, she said. That Kyle and his brother showed up. They did, they left, you're safe. For how long? Her voice cracked. How long until he stops looking? How long until I can breathe without wondering if today's the day he finds me? Reaper didn't have an answer that would comfort her, so he gave her the truth. I don't know. Some men give up after a few weeks, some take months. Some never stop. He paused. But you're not doing this alone. We'll make sure he knows the cost of looking, and eventually he'll decide it's not worth paying. And if he doesn't, then we'll be there when he tries. Myra was quiet for a long moment. Then, why? Why do you care this much about someone you don't even know? Reaper looked out at the gray sky, at the empty parking lot, at the building full of women who'd run from men who were supposed to love them. Because someone should have cared about my daughter, he said quietly. Someone should have stopped the drunk who got behind the wheel that night. Someone should have been paying attention. His voice was steady, but the weight in it was 17 years deep. Nobody was, so now I pay attention, simple as that. I'm sorry, Myra whispered, about your daughter. Me too. 3 weeks passed. Kyle Brennan tried twice more to find Myra. Once through her sister, who called the police when he showed up drunk at her house at midnight demanding answers. Once through Myra's old employer, a grocery store where she'd worked part-time, asking if she'd come by for her final paycheck. Both times Reaper and his brothers were watching. Both times Kyle found them waiting in parking lots, sitting on bikes, not saying anything, just there, just watching back. The third time Kyle saw them, something in him broke. Reaper watched it happen through binoculars from across the street. Watched Kyle get in his truck and just sit there with his head in his hands, shoulders shaking like a man who'd finally realized he'd lost something he couldn't punch or threaten his way back to. Garrett stopped helping after the second week, told Kyle he was done, that this obsession was going to get them both arrested or worse, that some battles weren't worth fighting. Kyle drank more, showed up to work late, got written up twice. His mother called him crying, asking what happened to his marriage, why Mara left, what he'd done. He had no answer that didn't make him sound like what he was. By the end of the month, Kyle stopped looking, stopped calling, stopped asking questions. Maybe because he was tired. Maybe because he'd seen enough Hell's Angels in his rearview mirror to understand they weren't going away. Maybe because somewhere deep down, underneath all the rage and entitlement, he knew he'd destroyed something irreplaceable, and no amount of searching would put it back together. Myra stayed in the safe house in Petoskey, got a job at a library, started therapy, called Reaper once a week just to talk, about nothing important, about books she was reading and how weird it felt to sleep without jumping at every sound, about the slow, painful work of remembering who she'd been before fear became her primary language. I'm thinking about cutting my hair, she said during one call. Something different, new start and all that. Yeah, Reaper was working on his bike in the clubhouse garage. What color? I don't know, maybe I'll dye it. Red or something Kyle would have hated. Reaper smiled, first time in a while. Do it, send me a picture. You'd want to see. Yeah, I would. She did 2 days later. Hair cut short and dyed a deep auburn that made her look like a different person. Younger, lighter. The smile in the photo was small but real. Reaper saved it to his phone. Showed it to Flint during church that night. She looks good, Flint said. Happy almost. Almost, Reaper agreed. That's a start. Outside, October gave way to November. The leaves finished falling. The cold settled in. And somewhere in northern Michigan, a woman who'd learned to shrink herself was slowly learning to take up space again. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life rarely gave those, but it was an ending where she got to wake up breathing. Where fear wasn't the first thing she felt when she opened her eyes. And for Reaper, for all of them, that was enough. That was the promise kept. Some roads don't lead anywhere except away from danger. And sometimes the people riding those roads are exactly who you need when the world turns dark. Myra learned to smile again, slowly, in a town where nobody knew her old name. And somewhere on the highway, engines still rumble in the night. Brothers who understand that protection isn't about being the loudest or the strongest. It's about being there when it matters. If this story touched something in you, hit subscribe and join our family. Because everyone deserves someone who will stand between them and the monsters, even if those monsters once promised to love them.